Hey, and welcome to day 11 of 365-ish days reading through the Bible together. Today we would have read Job 29 through 31. Remember, this year you are reading on your own time, I'm reading on my own time, and then we're just coming together to have a quick chit chat about what we read. So chapter 29, Job is continuing with his final speech. We ended in the middle of his final speech yesterday. So he's continuing with that. And I have a couple things highlighted in that chapter. So 29 verse 4, I actually highlighted that last year. It says, when I was in my prime, God's friendship was felt in my home. That's something that I now include in my prayers. It just stopped me in my tracks, and I was like, wow, like imagine people coming to your home and they can feel the presence of God. They can feel not just the presence, but the friendship of God. And so now I often pray that when people come on my property, that they can feel the friendship of God that lives here in my home. And I thought that was just beautiful imagery. And so, yeah, I highlighted it. In chapter 29, Job is speaking about like his former blessings. Yesterday we ended with him speaking on wisdom and understanding. Today he's speaking about like what it was like in his prime, like how the rocks, it says, my steps were awash in cream and the rocks gushed olive oil for me. Like that's how lavish he lived, basically. In my Bible, there's a little note that says that he was basically teetering the line of pride. It says Job was walking a fine line between bragging about past accomplishments and recalling good deeds in order to answer the charges against him. Job's one weakness throughout his conversations is that he came dangerously close to pride. Pride is especially deceptive when we are doing what is right, but it separates us from God by making us think we're better than we really are. Then we trust our own opinions, which leads to other kinds of sin. While it is not wrong to recount past deeds, it is far better to recount God's blessings to us. Reviewing past blessings of family, productivity, and meaningful service can help us get through times of suffering and remind us of God's goodness even when the present is devastating. Focusing on what God has done for us rather than on what we have done will help keep us from inadvertently falling into pride. I don't know why that word was so hard to say. Um, but yeah, I thought that was interesting because I didn't even catch that. I just thought he was just giving a recount of what kind of man, like he was a stand up guy. And I was just taking his word for it. But it was so interesting that they called it a fine line, like walking a fine line between bragging and being prideful versus recounting his blessings. So I thought that was interesting. Um, Job chapter 29, still verse 14, he says, righteousness covered me like a robe, and I wore justice like a turban. I guess I could see how that sounds a little prideful, but he said everything I did was honest. And skipping down to 18, he said, I thought surely I will die surrounded by my family after a long good life, for I am like a tree whose roots reach the water, whose branches are refreshed with the dew. New honors are constantly bestowed on me, and my strength is continually renewed. So I believe it's the very first chapter of Proverbs, says like, let's just flip there, something about a branch. See, this is why it was good to flip, because it wasn't Proverbs, it was Psalms. Um, it says, oh, the joys of those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or stand around with sinners, or join in with mockers, but they delight in the law of the Lord, meditating on it day and night. They are like trees planted along the riverbank, bearing fruit each season. Their leaves never wither, and they prosper in all they do. But not the wicked. That's Psalms chapter 1. And so I feel like that's the attitude Job had here. That's basically what he's saying. He was a tree, his roots were watered, and he thought he would die surrounded by family, but his family was taken before so he wouldn't get to live. to see them grow up. And I have it highlighted just as a reminder not to take things for granted, not to just assume that just because you're following the word, just because um, you believe that, Jesus lived, he died, and was resurrected just for you, and you've been baptized and do all the things, all the Christian things, that doesn't um, excuse you from suffering. That doesn't excuse you from the trials of life, and that doesn't guarantee you a golden ticket to the best life. So yeah, it sucks because like he said, he thought he was doing everything right. He thought that because he did everything right, he would get that honor of dying surrounded by family, but instead, that's not what's happening. Um, and then in chapter 31, this is the last time Job speaks um, before God speaks, I believe. He has someone else speaks, and then the Lord challenges Job. So he makes one final protest of his innocence. And yeah, that's where we are. He says, "Let the Almighty answer me, let the accuser write out the charges against me, and I would face the accusations proudly." He's like standing on business, like, I know I did not sin. Maybe pride might be the sin now that was pointed out to me. Um, but I know I didn't do anything to deserve this kind of punishment. And I will face God, and I will face whoever I need to face to defend my name. So yeah, he's not backing down. One thing I do want to touch upon is Bildad, Eliphaz, and Zophar. So yesterday, me and my husband were going back and forth because I was like, I find it interesting that his friends know the scripture, but they're applying it, they're trying to use it to almost condemn Job. For example, I think it was, hang on, please hold, I want to get the right scripture. Okay, so going back a little bit to chapter 22, verse 21, Eliphaz is speaking, and he says, "Submit to God, and you will have peace, then things will go well for you. Listen to his instructions and store them in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be restored, so clean up your life." And I had highlighted that in my Bible because I'm like, oh, they know biblical truth, but they're trying to twist it and apply it to circumstances that I feel like they're trying to condemn Job with biblical truth. And my husband was like, if I was Job's friend, I would say the same thing. Aren't you supposed to speak truth to them? And so that was very interesting because we were going back and forth because Eliphaz isn't saying anything wrong here. He is speaking Bible. He is telling them to submit to God. And my husband was like, whether they have, because I was like, well, they don't have evidence. They're just assuming that Job did something wrong and trying to get him to admit to what he did. And he was like, well, as a friend, if you think your friend did something wrong, wouldn't you speak the truth to them? So you might be feeling like that too, because I know, this has been my point of view of the Bible, and I've been very one-sided about these group of friends. But my husband so kindly pointed out to me that they might not be bad friends. Their hearts are probably in the right place, and I do think their hearts are in the right place. But yeah, so yeah, that's all I have to say. We'll see you tomorrow.